Hello and welcome to IT 1200 Introduction to Software Quality Assurance with Maureen Flannery. Again, the required textbook for this class is Foundations of Software Testing ISTQB, Certification 4th edition through Cengage Publishing. Before I start the lecture, I would like to remind you that prior to watching each lecture, I would like for you to read the chapter and take notes as you see fit. Also, before I start Chapter 4, I would like to say this. Chapter 4 was a particularly detailed and difficult chapter to read. It was more detailed than what I want you to know at this point because this is only an introductory class. It seemed like the textbook goes a little deeper than necessary, which made it a little denser and harder to understand. So my PowerPoint and lecture will be a little more geared toward simplifying the text. Also, my presentation has the content from the book rearranged a little bit to help with the flow in the explanation. To their credit, this chapter of the textbook is dense and difficult to read because the author was very careful and thorough to exactly explain everything. The authors were very precise, which caused the literature to be very dry. So, when viewing this lecture, please bear in mind that I am trying to simplify the content to make it more understandable on an introductory level. I hope you enjoy. Chapter 4, Test Techniques. 4.1, Categories of Test Techniques. There are different test techniques, and the purpose of each one is to identify test conditions, test cases, and test data. There is no best technique because each will find a specific type of defect. A variety of test techniques will find a variety of defects, which leads to more effective testing. Basically, diversity in testing is best because it will widen the net to catch more bugs. You can see in the picture of the classification that there are two major testing types, static testing and dynamic testing. Then dynamic testing breaks down into two major types. From there, there's white box testing and black box testing. 4.1.1, Choosing Test Techniques. The test technique is the procedure that the software development team uses to derive the test cases. In other words, it is the strategy the team uses to create the test cases and decide what you are going to test, how you are going to test, and the design that you will need to run the tests. Because I am an automated tester, I use a combination of Excel, SQL, and our own proprietary website to create, run, and review tests. With these, we create fake insurance policies and make sure that you have a variety of different types of homes, vehicles, policyholders, and coverages. Test technique is also called test case design technique, test specification technique, or test design technique. Upon your line of work, there could be even more names for it. White box testing is best used to find parts of the code that do not belong in it. It finds redundancies, Trojan horses, and contrary workflows. It tests what is already there by going through the code. Black box testing is used to find parts of the code that are missing. A tester inputs the necessary data and the software outputs their response. If the response is incorrect or non-existent, then the tester will know that some or all of the code is missing or bad. Since the tester does not know what is in the code, it is only testing what is not there. Factors that influence the choice of the test technique are 1. The component type, 2. The component or system complexity, 3. The regulatory standards, 4. Customary and contractual agreements, 5. The risk level and risk type, 6. Test objectives, 7. Available documentation, 8. Tester knowledge and skills, 9. Available tools, 10. Time and budget, 11. Software development lifecycle, 12. Expected use of the software, 13. The previous experience with test techniques, and 14. Types of defects expected in the system. 4.1.2, Categories of Test Techniques and their characteristics. There are two types of test techniques. There is static, which we covered in Chapter 3, and there is dynamic, which has 4 categories. In this slide, you can see the textbook has figure 4.1. First, there is the experience-based testing, which is testing that can't really be learned without exposure and time, or guidance from someone who has had exposure and time. Second, there is black box testing, which is also called specification-based or behavior-based. Because it is concerned only with input and output of the system, I'm sorry, I phrased that strangely. It is called specification-based or behavior-based because it is concerned only with the input and output of the system. Third, there is white box testing, which is also called structure-based because it is concerned with the evaluation of the code. Fourth, there is gray box testing. This one is not listed in the picture, but it is basically a hybrid between white box testing and black box testing. I imagine this in a situation where a tester is performing black box testing, but they happen to know a little bit about the code. They do not know as much as a developer, but they know enough that they can do some code review on their own. The experience-based test technique is a procedure to derive test cases based on a tester's experience. It is most useful when there are little or no specifications. It is often used when there's low risk or extreme time pressure for testing. User knowledge, skill, and background are the primary contributors to the test conditions, test case, and test data. Technology and business experience are both important here for perspective. Sometimes, when someone is new to a business, they would not know what's going on. But it is important to understand from the developer's point of view and from the business's point of view how things should be working. And that's where an experienced tester thrives. Because the developer often sees one thing and the business sees the other, the experienced tester can mitigate the difference between the two and make them see each other, and then create a different perspective. One common characteristic of the experience-based testing is that they are all based on human experience. Therefore, these tests are less systematic but are more effective. Also, this test technique is best used to complement black and white box testing. So, after all formal testing is completed, a tester can ask a more experienced colleague to review their work. While experience is not something that everyone on the team has, everyone on the team does have the ability to ask a colleague to review their work. The white box test technique is a procedure used to derive test cases based on analysis of the internal structure of the system. A tester needs to know what goes on inside the system in order to make sure things are working correctly. It is also known as structural test technique or structural-based test technique. Informally, it is often called glass box testing because you can see what is going on inside. There is some proprietary software that can be used for this task. An employer will usually purchase the license and train employees as needed for white box testing. Common characteristics of white box testing include the following. 1. The test conditions, test cases, and test data are all derived from the test basis that have the code, software architecture, and other information regarding the structure of the software. 2. Coverage is measured based on items tested within the selected structure, which means that a tester should make sure that they are only looking at the appropriate material in a test, and this is especially important in large projects. 3. The white box testing also determines the path through the software with the use of data inputs, so the expected outcome is required, which means that the test results should be known before the test begins, so a tester can tell if the output is good or not. (4.1.2) Categories of the test techniques and their characteristics. Black box test technique is a procedure used to derive test cases from specifications. This means that the input used in a test comes from the requirements of the design. It does not reference the internal structure because it is not concerned with the input and output of the system. Because it is only concerned with the input and output of the system. It views the software as a black box where you have no idea what's going on inside. In this type of testing, the tester's concern is what the software does, not how it does it. Now, because this is kind of conceptual at this point, I want to provide a more realistic application. The screenshot here is the Cuyahoga County Public Library site for an online application to get a card. If we wanted to test this site, we would have to evaluate the input and output. Let's look at the next slide. So on the on the top left of the screen is an Excel document, a screenshot of an Excel document. This is where the tester would put the data that will be added to the site through automation. And this is where the tester can put in good data, bad data, and questionable data. Then on the right, there's a screenshot of the site, which is waiting for input. The screen takes the information from the Excel document. The script takes the information from the Excel document and adds it to the site. The tester does not need to know how the script does this unless the employer specifies it. And to remain true black box testing, we will leave that information as unknown for now. So the tester creates the input and the developer creates the site. The script puts the two together and then provides the output. From there, the tester can see what passed in the test and what failed. Remember, in some scenarios, a failure is the desired outcome. Like for input for test 2, which has bad data in it several times. Common characteristics of black box testing include the following. 1, the test conditions, test cases, and test data all derive from the test basis, like the user requirements or specifications. 2, the test cases may be used to find gaps between the requirements and the actual implementation of those requirements, and any derivations from those requirements. 3, the coverage is measured based on items tested in the test basis and the techniques used. Basically, this means that it checks to make sure that every requirement listed has at least one test. The gray box test technique is not mentioned in the textbook, but I want to make sure that we talk about it a little bit in this class. While there is no clear definition of it, it is basically a hybrid between black box testing and white box testing. If you look at the previous example in black box testing, the script makes the automated input work with the site. It is not necessary to understand how the two work together, but it is often helpful. So if you look at the software that is represented by the zipper in this picture, then what you are doing is gray box testing. Now let's take a quick break.